Imagine, imagine you're just starving. Like you've been wandering through a desert for days, absolutely ravenous.
Oh man, yeah, worst case scenario.
Right. Your body is just aching for any kind of sustenance. And then out of nowhere, someone walks up and hands you a plate of your absolute favorite meal.
Okay.
It's warm. It's perfect. It is exactly what you need to survive. But instead of, taking it, your immediate knee-jerk instinct is to you slap the plate right out of their hands.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
just aggressively push it away, and then you retreat back into the desert to starve a little bit longer.
Which is just, I mean, it makes absolutely no logical sense.
Exactly. It makes zero sense. If you saw an animal do that in the wild, you'd think, well, its basic survival instincts are completely broken.
Totally.
Yet, when it comes to human connection, when it comes to love and emotional intimacy, millions of us do exactly this every single day. We literally run away from the exact thing we are craving the most.
We really do. And it
Yeah.
is it's arguably one of the most baffling, frustrating, and just painful paradoxes of the human experience.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
It is because if you're on the outside looking in, say, you're the person holding that metaphorical plate of food.
Right.
It just looks like self-sabotage. It looks like someone being intentionally difficult or, I don't know, even cruel.
Yeah, like they're just pushing you away for fun.
Exactly. But the research you brought for us to explore today, it flips that entire assumption completely on its head.
Which is exactly why we are jumping into this today.
Yeah.
So welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. And whether you, the listener, are tuning in right now to understand your own, baffling behaviors, or maybe you're trying to decode a partner who seems to constantly push you away when things get good.
Or even if you just have like an insatiable curiosity about the hidden mechanics of human psychology.
Right. You are in the right place. We are venturing deep into the waters of attachment wounds, the long shadows of dysfunctional family dynamics, and just the incredibly complex architecture of the human heart.
And before we get too far down this road, I really want to set a clear foundation for how we're approaching this today.
Oh, definitely. That's so important.
Because if you're listening and you recognize yourself in that opening scenario, like, if you are the one slapping the plate away, I need you to hear this.
Yeah.
This deep dive is not, an exercise in diagnosing you. We are not here to label your behaviors as toxic or to put you in some little box labeled broken.
Right. No pathologizing allowed today. None of that.
Yeah.
We are just looking at the mechanics, like the literal wiring of how these behaviors come to be.
Precisely. Because the central thesis of the research we're unpacking, it makes this profound assertion. It argues that choosing loneliness, pushing people away, isolating yourself when you are desperate for connection.
Which feels so counterintuitive.
It does. But none of that is a sign of weakness. It is, in fact, a deeply ingrained form of survival wisdom.
Survival wisdom.
Yeah. It's a profound, albeit currently painful intelligence that your mind and your nervous system developed just to keep you alive.
Just sitting with that phrase, survival wisdom, for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, it completely changes the emotional weather of this topic.
It really does shift the perspective.
Because it shifts the fundamental question. You stop asking, what is wrong with me? Why am I so broken? And you start asking, what kind of environment was I in that made this extreme behavior absolutely necessary for my survival?
Exactly. It treats the behavior as a successful adaptation, not a failure.
It is the ultimate adaptation.
It is. And the problem only arises because the adaptation outlasts the environment that actually required it.
Oh, wow.
You adapt to survive a war zone, but then you're dropped into a peaceful civilian neighborhood, and you are still diving into the trenches every single time a car backfires.
Right.
The wisdom that saved you is now, well, it's isolating you.
And we have an incredibly detailed map for how we're going to explore this transition today from the war zone to the civilian neighborhood.
We do. There's a lot of ground to cover.
We're going to unpack the neuroscience behind why genuine kindness can literally trigger a panic attack. We'll explore how chaotic early environments don't just make love hard to find, but they actually distort the dictionary definition of what love is supposed to be.
That part is fascinating.
It's wild. We're also going to dissect something called the caregiver's trap, which is the agonizing irony of becoming everyone else's emotional rock while your own foundation is just crumbling.
Right.
And finally, we'll talk about the actual mechanical process of rewiring this survival wisdom, like how to move toward radical self-acceptance without holding yourself to some punishing standard of perfection.
So let's look at that first major contradiction, the one you brought up in your opening analogy. The idea that being treated well, someone just being unconditionally kind to you, can actually cause a trauma response.
I really want to dig into the why of this. Because on paper, as we said, it completely defies logic.
It does.
If you are love-starved and someone is nice to you, the mathematical equation should be, need plus fulfillment equals happiness.
Right, that's what you'd expect.
But the research points out that people with attachment wounds often freeze, or they immediately throw up this massive, heavily armed defensive guard the very second someone is genuinely kind to them.
Yeah, they don't just politely decline the kindness, they become actively suspicious of it.
Highly suspicious.
They start anticipating ulterior motives immediately. Even when they're staring right at someone who is acting out of pure, unadulterated sincerity, their brain instantly goes to work running algorithms.
Like trying to predict the absolute worst-case scenario.
Exactly. They are looking for the hook hidden in the bait. And to understand the mechanism behind this, we have to look back at the original environment where their threat detection system was, calibrated.
Right. Where did they learn this?
The research traces this directly back to childhood spent in toxic, highly unpredictable, or dysfunctional homes. Homes where the very people who were meant to act as protectors fundamentally failed in that role.
Let me throw an analogy at you that came to mind while I was reading this.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure I'm visualizing this threat detection system correctly.
Sure, go for it.
It sounds to me like if you grew up in this kind of volatile environment, every single act of kindness looks like a Trojan horse.
Oh, that is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. Let's build out that image.
Okay, so imagine you're standing on the walls of your city. You're guarding your life.
Yeah.
And someone wheels this beautiful, impressive wooden horse up to your city gates.
Right.
Now, a person with a healthy, secure attachment, someone who grew up in a safe environment, looks down at that horse and says, wow, a gift.
Yeah, someone is being generous.
Exactly. This is amazing. Let's open the gates. Let's bring it inside. Let's throw a party. Because in their past experience, a gift is just a gift.
Exactly. Their historical data says gifts are safe.
But if you have these deep attachment wounds, you are standing on that exact same wall looking at the exact same beautiful gift, and you are terrified.
Your heart is pounding.
Because your historical data tells a very different story.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking, I know exactly how this story ends. There are heavily armed soldiers hiding in the belly of that thing.
Right.
The moment I open my gates, the moment I let that vulnerability into my city, they're going to wait until my guard is down, and then they're going to burn my entire life to the ground.
Yeah.
So you aren't slapping the plate away because you're ungrateful. You are rejecting the Trojan horse because you are just trying to survive the night.
And this is where we have to look at the underlying neuroscience of what is happening inside the brain when that Trojan horse rolls up to the gate.
Because it isn't just a conscious thought process, right?
Not at all. It's not like the person is standing there stroking their chin, rationally weighing the pros and cons of accepting a compliment. The reaction is infinitely faster than conscious thought.
Right, because if it were conscious, you could just talk yourself out of it. You could say, hey, it's just a compliment on my sweater, relax.
Exactly, but you can't.
But that doesn't work, does it? So what is actually happening chemically or neurologically there?
We're talking about the amygdala hijacking the brain.
The amygdala.
Yeah. The amygdala is essentially your brain's fire alarm system. Its entire job is to scan the environment for threats based on your past experiences.
Okay.
In a brain that has been wired by early, repetitive trauma, the boundary between kindness and danger has been structurally blurred.
Wow. Why is that?
Because in a volatile home, kindness is rarely just kindness. It's a currency. It's a manipulation tactic. Or, most terrifyingly, it is the prelude to violence.
The calm before the storm.
Exactly. When you're a child in a chaotic environment, your physical and emotional survival depends on your ability to anticipate a shift in the weather. If a typically abusive, raging, or neglectful caregiver suddenly brings you a toy or suddenly starts speaking in a soft, soothing voice, the child learns very rapidly that this kindness is a trap.
It's bait.
Right. It might be a bribe, so the child will keep a secret. It might be the abuser seeking forgiveness and what we call the honeymoon phase of the abuse cycle, right before the tension builds and the violence starts all over again.
So the nervous system literally codes the sensation of, someone being nice to me as the preliminary warning siren for an incoming attack.
Yes. The brain creates a neural pathway that associates vulnerability, which is absolutely required to accept kindness with imminent betrayal.
That is so intense.
It is. So cut to 20 years later. A coworker walks up to this person and says, "Hey, I was making a coffee run. I brought you a latte just because."
A completely benign, normal social interaction.
To a secure nervous system, yes, totally normal. But to the wounded nervous system, the amygdala sees the coffee, references its historical database, finds the file labeled unexpected gifts, and instantly rings the fire alarm.
Oh, wow. So it just floods the body.
It floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline, the heart rate spikes, the muscles tense. All of this happens in milliseconds, long before the prefrontal cortex. The logical, rational part of the brain that knows this is just a coworker can even get online to assess the situation.
So the fire alarm is just so loud you literally can't hear the logic.
Which is exactly why the response seems so disproportionate. The person might freeze, they might get visibly stiff, or they might coldly say, "I didn't ask for that, what do you want?"
And the coworker walks away thinking, wow, what a jerk.
Exactly.
And meanwhile, the person who rejected the coffee is probably experiencing a massive internal crash, right? Wondering why they just alienated someone who's being nice to them.
Usually, yes. The shame spiral hits hard right after.
Which brings us back to that concept of survival wisdom. The relief of understanding this mechanism must be immense.
Oh, absolutely.
If you can realize that your suspicion, your tendency to ruin a good thing just as it feels too good to be true, isn't because you have a fundamentally flawed personality. It is simply your amygdala doing the exact job it was trained to do in a war zone.
It's an overperforming security guard. It hasn't realized that the war is over, that you've moved to a safe neighborhood.
Right.
And understanding that allows you to stop attacking yourself. You can say to your brain, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but this is just a latte. There are no soldiers in this horse."
I love that. There are no soldiers in this horse.
But getting the brain to actually believe that requires us to understand how this early environment distorts the very definition of love. Which brings us to the next massive hurdle the research identifies.
Yeah, let's transition right into that. Because if kindness is coded as a threat, if affection equals a Trojan horse, then what on earth is the baseline definition of love for a person growing up with these wounds?
It's a great question.
We know that as humans, we are biologically driven to seek connection. We are pack animals. We need love to survive just as much as we need water. So if the well at home is poisoned, what does a child drink?
The research paints a very stark, very sobering picture of how this baseline is formed. It argues that growing up around physical violence or chronic emotional indifference fundamentally warps the vocabulary of love.
Right.
But it highlights one specific dynamic that I found incredibly profound: the deafening silence of the adult who should have intervened.
This silent bystander. That section of the research completely stopped me in my tracks.
That's powerful.
Because culturally, when we talk about childhood trauma, we almost exclusively focus on the overt actions, the yelling, the hitting, the active abuse. But the research argues that the inaction can leave a deeper, more insidious scar. Let's unpack the mechanism of that. Why is silence so damaging?
To understand the damage of silence, we have to look at how a child constructs their understanding of safety. Imagine a scenario. A child is in a living room, and one parent is actively raging. They're screaming, breaking things, creating a terrifying, chaotic environment. The child's nervous system is naturally in a state of absolute terror.
Right.
In that moment, the child instinctively looks to the other adult in the room, maybe the other parent, a grandparent, or even an older sibling. They look to the person whose evolutionary job is to be the protector.
They're looking for the rescue. They're looking for the adult to step in and say, "Stop this, you're scaring the child."
Exactly. But what happens if that protector just looks down at the floor?
Oh, man.
What if they just hold their breath, shrink into the couch, and do absolutely nothing to intervene?
I'm getting a knot in my stomach just visualizing that. The total abandonment in that moment.
It is a profound structural betrayal
Mm-hmm.
because the child's developing brain is trying to make sense of the world. The raging parent is terrifying, yes, but it's the silent parent who breaks the child's reality.
Wait, how so?
Because the silence teaches the child that safety is a complete illusion. It teaches them that the people who say they love you will watch you suffer and do nothing.
Wow.
It codes love as passive, cowardly, and ultimately just useless in the face of danger. The core lesson the nervous system absorbs is, when things get bad, you are entirely, devastatingly on your own.
Okay, so let's track this child into adulthood.
Yeah.
They have absorbed this twisted vocabulary where love equals abandonment and kindness equals danger.
Right.
But they still have that biological drive for connection. They still want to be loved. So what do? The research mentions they try to learn about love academically.
They do. It's a very common coping mechanism because their internal lived experience of love is so warped, they turn to external media to figure out what normal people do.
Like studying for a test.
Exactly. They consume books, they watch romantic comedies, they study psychology, deep dives like this one. They observe their friends' relationships with intense scrutiny. They are essentially trying to build a vast cognitive library of what healthy love is supposed to look like.
It's like they're cramming for a final exam in a language they've never actually spoken out loud.
That is a perfect analogy. They learn all the grammar rules, they memorize the vocabulary, they can write a perfect essay on what healthy boundaries look like.
Right.
But there is a colossal gaping chasm between intellectual knowledge and physical somatic experience. And this gap is why the research notes that unexpected affection causes such intense, almost painful awkwardness for these individuals.
I really want to push back on this a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate for the listener who leans very heavily on logic.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because a lot of high-achieving, intelligent people struggle with this exact frustration. They go to therapy, they read the books, they intellectually know that their partner is safe and that a hug is a good thing.
Right, they know it cognitively.
Exactly. So why can't an intelligent adult just use their big prefrontal cortex to fake it till they make it? If you have memorized the script of how to accept love, why can't you just read the lines? Why isn't cognitive knowledge enough to override the awkwardness?
Because the nervous system does not speak English.
Oh,
It doesn't read books. It operates entirely on sensory input and historical association. I want you, the listener, to think about learning to ride a bicycle.
okay.
Imagine you have never been on a bike in your life, but you decide you want to learn, so you go to the library and you read 20 thick textbooks on the physics of cycling. You memorize the gyroscopic effects of the spinning wheels. You understand the exact mathematical angle of a turn. You can perfectly articulate the mechanics of the pedals and the chain.
Okay, you're a bicycle genius on paper.
Exactly. You have a PhD in the theory of bicycle riding.
Yeah.
But the very first time you walk outside, throw your leg over the frame, sit on that narrow seat, and lift both feet off the ground. What happens?
You immediately fall over and scrape your knee.
You crash. Instantly.
Yeah.
Because your brain's intellectual understanding of balance has absolutely no bearing on your body's somatic muscle memory.
Right.
Your inner ear, your proprioceptors, your nervous system, they don't know what it physically feels like to balance on two wheels. They have no experiential data to draw from.
So when it comes to love and affection,
Yeah.
a person with attachment wounds is trying to ride the bicycle without ever having felt what balance feels like.
Yes. When a partner walks up behind them and gives them a sudden, unexpected hug, it isn't processed as a loving gesture first. It's processed as a sudden restriction of physical movement by an external force.
Oh, wow, that sounds terrifying.
It is. The body freezes, the muscles go rigid, the person might flinch or physically pull away. Not because they don't want the hug intellectually, but because their nervous system simply does not have the experiential blueprint, the muscle memory, to process that sensory input as safe.
That is heartbreaking. You have the desire for the connection, you have the intellectual knowledge that it's a good thing, but your physical vehicle, your body just betrays you.
It is deeply frustrating for the individual, but the research offers a very specific, incredibly comforting reframing here.
What's
It explicitly states that lacking the opportunity to learn something physically is not the same as lacking the innate ability to do it.
Oh, I like that.
If you crash the bicycle on your first try, it doesn't mean you have a genetic defect that makes you incapable of cycling. It just means you need training wheels and practice.
Lacking the opportunity is not lacking the ability. If you are listening to this, that is a concept worth writing on a sticky note and putting on your bathroom mirror.
Truly. It removes the massive burden of shame.
Yeah, if you freeze up when someone says, "I love you," or if you recoil when someone touches your shoulder, you are not fundamentally broken. You didn't lose the capacity for love. You were just never given the physical training wheels of safety when you were developing.
And while that is a hopeful realization because it means the muscle memory can eventually be built, we have to acknowledge the reality of how this lack of physical memory shapes a person's life right now.
Right, in the present day.
Because this freezing response, this awkwardness, it doesn't just happen in isolated moments of physical touch. It dictates the entire architecture of how these individuals construct their social existence.
Which brings us to the next crucial phase of our exploration. How do you design your life when your biology tells you that connection is a threat, but your psychology is starving for it?
It's a tricky balance.
The research describes this as building a very specific type of loneliness. Because we aren't just talking about people who move to a cabin in the woods and never speak to another soul.
No, not at all.
We're talking about people who are embedded in society, who have jobs, who go to parties, but who have constructed massive, invisible moats around their inner selves.
It's an active, daily construction project. The research observes a very distinct behavioral loop. These individuals will engage in a conversation, they'll feel a genuine spark of connection. Maybe they find they have a shared interest with someone, or they feel understood for a moment. But the very second they start to open up, the moment that vulnerability becomes real, they almost involuntarily take a massive step backward.
The classic push-pull dynamic. Come close to me.
Yeah.
Wait, no, that's too close. Get away.
Exactly. And the result is a life heavily dominated by superficiality. The text notes that these individuals become absolute masters at swallowing their true words.
Oh, man.
They might be in a conversation about a movie and they feel a deep, vulnerable thought bubble up about how the movie relates to their own childhood. But the threat detection system kicks in, the amygdala says vulnerability is dangerous, and they instantly censor the thought.
So they just swallow the profound thing and retreat back to talking about cinematography or the weather?
Exactly.
But the fascinating thing the research points out is that even when they're keeping it perfectly safe, even when they're just chatting about the weather, sudden anxiety can strike out of nowhere. I really want to drill into the mechanics of that. If they are successfully keeping the conversation superficial, why the sudden spike in panic?
Because keeping that defensive armor up 100% of the time requires an astronomical amount of neurological energy.
It's exhausting.
It's incredibly exhausting to constantly monitor what you're saying, how you're standing, what the other person might be thinking. During a casual chat, because it is superficial, the person might actually relax for a fraction of a second. The vigilance drops, the armor slips a fraction of an inch. And the moment the nervous system realizes the armor has slipped, it panics. It suddenly feels completely exposed, naked to the world.
Wow.
It's a terrifying, visceral sensation of being unprotected, and it triggers a massive spike in anxiety seemingly out of nowhere.
Okay, I want to introduce an analogy here to help visualize this architecture of loneliness. Because the research talks about who these individuals actually feel safe letting into their lives, and is incredibly counterintuitive.
It really is.
It's not the super nice, well-adjusted people with great boundaries.
No, it rarely is.
So imagine your emotional self is a house. You want guests to come over so badly. You are lonely. But because of your past, you are absolutely terrified of violent home invaders.
Right.
So to ensure no intruders can ever get in, you decide to brick up the entire house. You brick over all the doors. You brick over all the ground floor windows. You seal yourself inside a solid brick cube.
Okay, I can picture that.
Now, you are safe from intruders, but you suddenly realize you are completely trapped inside, alone, in the dark.
It's a perfect encapsulation of the survival wisdom becoming a prison.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, according to the research, who do you feel safe with? You only feel safe with other people who live in their own bricked-up houses.
That's right.
Because you look at them and think, they understand the layout. They know how terrifying the world is. They aren't going to try to bust down my bricks because they're too busy guarding their own.
There is an unspoken treaty between people in bricked-up houses.
Right. But then imagine a super friendly, securely attached, well-adjusted person comes bounding up to your house.
Oh.
They have a fruitcake, they're smiling, and they start knocking on the bricks saying, "Hey, I'm your new neighbor. Come on out. Let's be best friends. Let's share our deepest secrets."
Yeah.
To a normal person, this is lovely. But to the person trapped inside the brick house, that friendly neighbor doesn't feel like a friend. They feel like a dangerous, unpredictable threat trying to breach the perimeter.
Yes. To the wounded nervous system, the overly friendly person is indistinguishable from a home invader.
It's so backwards, but it makes so much sense.
Let's analyze the psychology of why that overly friendly person triggers such intense rejection, because the research touches on a critical concept here: unclear personal boundaries.
Let's define that, because
Yeah.
boundaries is a huge buzzword right now.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean in this context?
In a healthy childhood, you're taught that you have physical and emotional autonomy. You have an emotional skin that separates you from your parents. You are allowed to have your own feelings, your own privacy, your own space. But when you grow up in a dysfunctional, enmeshed, or abusive home, boundaries do not exist. Your privacy is constantly violated. Your emotions are dictated to you stop crying, you have nothing to cry about.
Well, that's a classic one.
Your physical space is invaded. You are fundamentally enmeshed in the chaos of the adults around you. You never learn where your emotional skin ends and the rest of the world begins.
You are just a sponge absorbing the toxic weather of the house.
Precisely. So as an adult, when an overly friendly, highly extroverted person tries to rapidly close the emotional distance, when they try to bypass the small talk and force intimacy, it doesn't feel welcoming.
No.
It feels violently invasive. It triggers the deep historical memory of being consumed, controlled, and having no autonomy. The person with attachment wounds will look at this friendly person and their brain will say, this person does not respect my bricks. If they get inside, they will take over.
And so they go on the offensive to protect the house.
Mm-hmm.
The research points out that they will often aggressively self-sabotage.
Yes, they do.
They'll intentionally ruin the relationship, start a massive fight, or simply ghost the person before their true self is exposed.
It's a preemptive strike. The underlying belief is, if this friendly person actually breaks through my bricks and sees the mess inside this house, they're going to be disgusted by how broken I am, and they will abandon me anyway.
Right.
So I will reject them first. I will control the ending of this story. It is infinitely easier to endure the pain of rejecting someone than to risk the catastrophic pain of being truly known and then abandoned.
I'll fire you before you can quit. It gives them a false sense of control over the loneliness. But let's go back to the people they do let in, the other people in the bricked-up houses. Why is that shared trauma so magnetically attractive?
Because shared pain creates an instant, unspoken baseline of safety. There's a profound, almost intoxicating relief in sitting with someone who just gets the darkness.
You don't have to explain it.
Exactly. You don't have to explain why you flinched when a door slammed. You don't have to translate your anxiety. You speak the same native language of survival.
It's like finding a fellow veteran from the same war.
It is. However, we have to look closely at the danger of this dynamic, which the research implicitly warns about.
Because it's not all positive, right?
No. Finding safety in shared pain is a very valid and often entirely necessary early stage of healing. But it can easily become a permanent trap, what we call trauma bonding.
Because you aren't actually helping each other build doors, you're just sitting in the dark together comparing bricks.
Exactly. If you only ever associate with people who are equally wounded, who are equally terrified of vulnerability, you severely limit your ability to experience relationships built on anything other than mutual survival.
Wow.
You never learn how to connect over joy or mutual growth or secure attachment. You risk normalizing the trauma rather than healing it. The ultimate goal has to be slowly, incrementally, learning how to put a small window in that brick wall just to see what the light looks like without tearing the whole house down.
Which is an incredibly daunting transition to make. And that leads us into what is honestly one of the most agonizing ironies presented in this entire body of research.
The caregiver's trap.
Yes, the caregiver's trap.
Yeah.
Because if you just listen to that last section, you would assume that a person living inside a heavily fortified, bricked-up house, terrified of connection, would just be totally isolated, selfish, and self-absorbed. But the reality is the exact opposite.
It is a fascinating dichotomy. The research highlights that people with deep attachment wounds, these people living behind massive walls, are very often highly, almost supernaturally attuned to other people's emotional states.
They're the empaths.
They are. Because they had to be hypervigilant as children just to survive, their emotional radar is world-class. They can walk into a room and instantly read the micro-expressions on everyone's faces.
Like they're reading minds.
Basically. They know exactly when someone is secretly hurting. They know when a conversation is about to turn hostile. They know who needs a listening ear.
And as a result, they become the absolute pillar of their social circles. They are the go-to counselor, the mediator, the crisis manager for their friends and their family. They're the person everyone else calls at 2 a.m. when their life is falling apart.
But here is the tragedy of the caregiver's trap. Their world-class emotional radar only points outward.
Oh.
It's a unidirectional antenna. They are entirely incapable of directing that profound compassion, that deep understanding inward toward their own suffering.
The research gives us this incredibly visceral, specific image that I think will resonate painfully with a lot of listeners.
Yeah.
It describes this caregiver, the person who just spent all day holding space for their friend's drama, solving everyone's problems, being the strong one, spending the night curled up tightly in bed, holding onto a body pillow.
It is a devastating image of somatic deprivation. Clinging to a body pillow in the dark, filled with unfulfilled feelings, a deep sense of shame, and intense silent frustration.
So sad.
It is the physical manifestation of an ache for a connection that they feel fundamentally forbidden to voice. They have the skill set to soothe an entire room of panicked people, but the basic concept of self-soothing, or asking someone else to soothe them, is entirely alien.
Let's dig into the mechanism of why they do this. Why do they pour all their energy into fixing others when they're starving themselves?
The research mentions they were never taught how to be spoiled, which is a fascinating word choice.
It is.
It implies they were never allowed to just be a dependent, messy, needy kid.
They were parentified. In a dysfunctional home, a child often has to earn their keep by being useful. If the parents are chaotic, addicted, or absent, the child steps up. They become the adult.
Right.
They make the meals, they manage the parents' emotional outbursts, they keep the peace. Their subconscious learns a very brutal equation. I am only allowed to exist, I am only safe from being abandoned, as long as I am useful.
So the caregiving isn't just altruism, it's a defense mechanism. It is entirely a defense mechanism. It's a strategy for control. If I am managing your emotions, if I am solving your problems, then you aren't going to blow up and hurt me. I am neutralizing the threat by taking care of you.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
Furthermore, if you depend on me, you can't abandon me. So, as an adult, they equate their core worth entirely with their utility. If they stop being the caregiver, if they suddenly have a need, they fear they will become a burden, and burdens get abandoned.
Which means showing their own weakness isn't just a matter of swallowing their pride. To their nervous system, showing weakness feels like stepping on a landmine. It feels like risking total annihilation.
Absolutely.
But this brings up a psychological quirk in the research that I really want to dissect. It's about who these caregivers actually trust, because it's twisted.
Okay, let's look at it.
The research notes that these individuals will heavily doubt kind people, which we discussed with the Trojan horse, but they readily, almost eagerly, believe people who criticize, demean, or negate them. Why on earth would our brains prefer the person who tells us we are awful over the person who tells us we are great?
This brings us to the psychological concept of familiar pain. We have to look at the internal baseline this person is operating from.
Okay.
If your fundamental, deeply ingrained belief about yourself, a belief planted there by a childhood of neglect or abuse, is that you are inherently worthless, that you are a burden, that you are unlovable, then any external information that confirms that belief registers to your brain as true.
It's like a devastating form of confirmation bias.
It is emotional confirmation bias. Imagine your brain as a filing cabinet, and the biggest, thickest file in there is labeled, "I am a failure." When someone walks up to you and says, "You are brilliant, you are beautiful, I love you," your brain takes that information, goes to the filing cabinet, and says, "Wait, this doesn't match our records. This must be a lie. This person is trying to manipulate us."
So it just rejects the compliment completely.
It rejects it because it contradicts the core identity.
But when a boss berates them, or a toxic partner tells them they are selfish and difficult to love,
the brain takes that criticism, checks the filing cabinet, and says, "Ah, yes, this matches our records perfectly. This person sees the real me. This person is telling the truth."
that is just, wow.
A critic feels honest, and therefore, in a very bizarre, twisted way, the critic feels safe. Because predictability, even if it is painful, is always preferable to the nervous system than the unpredictable danger of a lie. A compliment feels like a dangerous lie.
This matches our records. That is chilling, but it explains why so many incredibly empathetic, wonderful people end up trapped in relationships with narcissistic or highly critical partners. The partner is just vocalizing the caregiver's own internal monologue. So how do you break the caregiver's trap?
To break the trap, to actually begin caring for yourself and to start believing compliments, requires you to fundamentally challenge that internal filing cabinet. You have to do something that feels neurologically terrifying. You have to intentionally show your own weakness to a safe person. The research is highly emphatic on this point. Showing weakness is not a defeat. Asking for help is not becoming a burden. It is the necessary foundational practice of dismantling the survival wisdom. You have to prove to your brain that you can have a need, and the world will not end.
Which requires a massive shift in how you view your own worth. And that internal view of our worth dictates almost everything we do out in the real world, which transitions us into examining the outer mirror of this inner worth. We're looking at how this internal battle, this denying of one's own needs, and believing the critics doesn't just result in a lonely Friday night holding a body pillow. It literally shrinks the physical and temporal landscape of a person's entire life.
It creates a pervasive, suffocating restriction on human potential. The research outlines how a damaged sense of self-esteem fundamentally restricts a person's choices in almost every arena of human endeavor. Romantic pursuits, academic ambitions, career trajectories.
Yeah.
Because the individual feels they inherently lack value, they preemptively remove themselves from the game before the whistle even blows.
It's the voice that says, I'm not going to apply for that promotion. They would never pick me. Or I'm not going to ask that person out. They're entirely out of my league. I'd just be embarrassing myself.
Exactly. And the research makes a profound observation here regarding the nature of success in the world. It notes that outward confidence and the subsequent success it brings is dictated far more by self-evaluation than by actual innate ability.
Meaning, the person who gets the job isn't always the smartest. They're just the one who believed they belonged in the interview chair.
Yes. You can have an individual with deep attachment wounds who possesses genius-level intellect, incredible empathy, and high competence, but who stays in a low-level, unfulfilling job for 30 years because their internal filing cabinet says they don't deserve more.
That's a tragedy.
It is.
Yeah.
Conversely, you can have someone with very average abilities but high, secure self-worth who continuously advances, takes risks, and builds a massive life simply because they believe they have the right to take up space in those rooms.
Okay, I want to try a new analogy here to explain how this restriction works mechanically. It's like your self-esteem acts as an internal emotional thermostat.
A thermostat. Let's explore that mechanism.
Right. So say your childhood trauma set your internal worth thermostat permanently at 50 degrees. It's chilly, it's uncomfortable, but it's what you are used to. It is your baseline. Now, let's say you get an amazing new job, or you start dating someone who treats you like absolute gold. Suddenly, the temperature in your life rises to 75 degrees. It's warm, it's sunny, it feels great. But your internal thermostat detects that the temperature is wrong. It doesn't match the 50-degree baseline.
The nervous system senses a deviation from the familiar.
Exactly. So what does the thermostat do? It automatically kicks on the air conditioning to freeze the room back down. You start a massive fight with that great partner. You start showing up late to that amazing job. You subconsciously sabotage the good thing to bring the temperature of your life back down to the 50 degrees you feel you actually deserve. You shrink what you call your challenge radius to stay in the cold zone.
That is a brilliant mechanical metaphor. The sabotage is the air conditioning kicking on, and the lack of validation you experienced early in life acts as the permanent wiring of that thermostat. It keeps you tethered, keeping you from exploring the warmth of your full potential. You stay within a very small, very safe, but very unfulfilling perimeter.
But the research doesn't just talk about career and romance. It talks about how this 50-degree thermostat shows up in the physical body.
Yeah.
Like literally in how we present ourselves to the world through grooming and self-care.
Yes, it highlights the deeply synergistic feedback loop between the mind and the physical environment. The text points out that there is a crucial, undeniable balance between the inner mind and the outer appearance.
How does that show up?
It specifically mentions that neglecting personal grooming, abandoning basic self-care routines, is very often a direct physical manifestation of profound inner turmoil.
You stop caring about the wrapper because your internal filing cabinet says the candy inside is worthless. Why polish a broken machine?
Exactly.
Yeah.
When the mind is drowning in chaos, or when it is fully submerged in that 50-degree feeling of worthlessness, the neurological energy required to care for the physical self just evaporates. Taking a shower feels like climbing Everest. But the text also warns against the opposite extreme. It notes that focusing purely on the outside, obsessing over physical looks, spending money you don't have on designer clothes to mask the pain, trying to look perfect on social media doesn't work if the inside is empty.
It's like painting over dry rot in a house. It looks good for a minute, but the structure is still failing.
Right. The shine won't last. It's a desperate facade that will eventually crack under the immense pressure of the internal void. But conversely, the research states that ignoring the outside entirely, adopting a cynical philosophy of, oh, only the inside matters, caring about clothes or hair is superficial, is also a dangerously extreme view.
Wait, really?
Yes, it is very often a defense mechanism designed to avoid the vulnerability of trying to look good and potentially failing, or worse, the vulnerability of actually being noticed by other people.
So if focusing only on the inside is a trap and focusing only on the outside is a facade, what is the actual mechanism for breaking the feedback loop? How do we reset the thermostat?
The research suggests that because healing is synergistic, we can actually use the physical body to hack the mind. We can rely on the tangible power of behavioral activation.
Behavioral activation.
Yeah. You do not have to wait to fix your entire internal landscape before you start taking care of your outside. Sometimes the physical action must precede the emotional feeling.
Wait, really? So you can start from the outside in? You can trick the brain?
You aren't tricking it. You are providing it with new sensory data. By slowly, intentionally changing your external habits, you send powerful afferent signals back up the spinal cord to the brain.
Give me an example.
Think about the actual mechanics of taking a shower. The sensation of warm water, the smell of a soap you chose for yourself, the act of putting on clothes that fit well and feel soft. When you execute these small acts of self-grooming, you are forcing your physical body to act out the reality of someone who possesses inherent worth.
You are physically modeling self-worth.
Yes. And as you do this consistently, the brain receives these sensory inputs and begins to slowly shift its chemistry. Dopamine and serotonin are slightly elevated. The mind begins to find tiny sparks of joy in these small acts, and that external care reinforces the internal healing.
Wow.
It proves that recovery is a holistic, bidirectional process. You change the mind to help the body, but you can also move the body to heal the mind.
It's like you are manually forcing the thermostat up 1 single degree at a time. Today, I am going to tolerate 51 degrees, which means I am worth a hot shower.
Exactly.
Tomorrow, I will tolerate 52 degrees, which means I am worth a clean shirt.
Yeah.
And eventually, months or years down the line, you realize your baseline is 70 degrees and you are worth a healthy relationship and a fulfilling career.
Beautifully articulated.
Oh.
And that slow, intentional, deeply patient pacing brings us to the absolute culmination of our exploration today.
Which is how we actually step out of the brick house for good. We've spent this entire deep dive unpacking the heavy, dense mechanics of trauma. We've looked at how the amygdala turns kindness into a threat, the tragedy of the silent bystander, the walls we build to survive, the agonizing caregiver's trap, and how our ruined self-esteem shrinks our physical world.
We've covered a lot.
The emotional climax of this conversation has to be the path forward. Because hearing all of this, understanding the sheer weight of this survival wisdom, it could easily feel like you're standing at the bottom of Mount Everest in flip-flops. How do we actually begin to rewire these incredibly deep neural pathways without becoming completely paralyzed by the scale of the task?
It can feel incredibly daunting, yes. But the final insights from this research offer profound, actionable relief. The very first and most uncompromising rule the text lays out for rewiring yourself is this: do not aim for perfection.
Thank goodness. Because perfectionism is usually what got us into this anxious mess in the first place.
Exactly. Perfectionism is just another defense mechanism. The first step on the path forward is not to magically wake up tomorrow as a securely attached, perfectly vulnerable person who loves freely and trusts completely. That is a fantasy.
Right.
The first step is simply radically accepting the current version of yourself that struggles to love and trust.
Accepting the messy, guarded, hyper-vigilant version of you.
Yes. You have to stop fighting the survival wisdom and acknowledge it. You have to say, I see the wall, I know why I built the wall, and it's okay that the wall is here right now. You have to acknowledge the wound before you can treat it.
That makes sense.
The research emphasizes that as you begin to experiment with letting people in, there will be massive trial and error. And that error is not shameful. It is proof for forward momentum.
So if you try to open up to a partner and your amygdala suddenly hijacks you and you panic and push them away, that isn't a failure.
No, that is just a repetition in the gym of neuroplasticity. It is a data point. It is part of the messy, nonlinear process of unlearning. If you go to the gym to lift weights and your muscles fail on the 10th rep, you don't say, well, my body is fundamentally broken. I guess I'll never be strong.
Right. You say, that was my limit today. I'll come back tomorrow.
Exactly.
I love this perspective. There's a specific sentiment in the research that I highlighted, and it basically says, if you were just a tiny microscopic bit more honest or vulnerable today than you were yesterday, that is a massive monumental victory. We have to stop grading our emotional growth on a brutal pass-fail curve.
And we so often do. We think, I panicked and deflected a compliment today. I'm a total failure. The therapy isn't working. I'll never get better. But the biological reality is that unlearning deep-seated habits takes time.
It's not overnight.
There is no quick fix, no magic pill for a nervous system that has spent 2 or 3 decades operating in a war zone. Furthermore, the research stresses that healing is not about becoming a blank slate. You cannot erase the past.
People desperately try, though. They want the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind treatment. Just go in, wipe the bad memories, delete the painful childhood so they can just be a normal person.
But the research emphasizes the absolute futility and the danger of trying to erase those memories. Healing is about integration, not amputation. You don't cut off the wounded part of yourself.
Integration.
The goal is to find a way to live with the past, to integrate the scared, hyper-vigilant parts of yourself into a cohesive adult whole. It's about looking at that frightened inner child who is desperately trying to brick up the house and saying, I see you, I know exactly why you're terrified, I honor what you did to survive, but I am the adult driving the car now. We are safe, and we are going to try putting a small window in this wall today.
It's taking the steering wheel back from the amygdala.
Yes.
Yeah.
The profound truth the research leads us to is this. You did not choose your past. You did not choose the chaotic environment, the silent bystanders, or the trauma that wired you to fear kindness. You are not responsible for the damage. But the past does not have to dictate your future. You have agency now.
And as we look at this path forward, I want to highlight the tone of the research we've been pulling from. There is this deep, almost palpable respect for anyone who is willing to face their own inner darkness. It's not condescending. It isn't some chipper, toxic positivity guru yelling at you to just manifest better relationships or think positive thoughts.
No, it is deeply grounded in empathy and biological reality. It is an acknowledgement of the staggering amount of courage it takes to look at your own protective armor that literally kept you alive and make the conscious decision to start taking it off.
Yeah.
And if you are listening to this right now, I want to say this directly to you. Give yourself grace. The armor you wear, the suspicion you feel when someone is kind, the instinct to isolate all of it took years, maybe decades to build. It was constructed brick by heavy brick while you were under active fire. It is going to take time to safely dismantle it.
You can't just wire it with dynamite and blow it up overnight. If you do, you'll bring the whole house down on yourself.
Exactly. You remove it brick by brick in safe environments with safe people at a pace that your nervous system can tolerate. It is a slow, iterative, deeply brave process of teaching your body that the war is finally over.
And every single time you successfully take down one brick, every time you let a genuine compliment land without deflecting it, every time you tell a friend, hey, I'm actually really struggling today, instead of pretending everything is perfectly fine, every time you take a shower, just because you deserve to feel clean, you are physically rebuilding your nervous system.
You really are.
You are forging new neural pathways. You are manually turning up that internal thermostat.
You are transitioning from the survival wisdom of the past to the living wisdom of the present.
And that is exactly what this journey is ultimately about. So let's pull all of these threads together. Let's recap the immense terrain we've covered in this deep dive.
Sounds good.
We started by unpacking the neuroscience of why chaotic childhood environments literally hijack our threat detection, turning genuine kindness and unexpected affection into a perceived Trojan horse.
We examined how learning about love from external media creates a terrifying somatic gap when we are faced with actual physical affection. Our bodies simply lack the experiential muscle memory to balance on the bicycle of intimacy.
We looked closely at the architecture of loneliness, how we build heavy brick houses with no doors to protect our fragile hope for connection, and why we ironically only feel safe around other wounded people while aggressively rejecting the friendly neighbors who try to get too close.
We dissected the caregiver's trap, the tragedy of the hyper-empathetic individual who uses caregiving as a defense mechanism, managing everyone's crises to maintain control, but who ends up emotionally starved, trusting only their critics and rejecting praise.
We explored how a damaged internal thermostat shrinks our entire reality, forcing us to restrict our careers and romances to the cold zone we feel we deserve, and why engaging in physical self-care can actually send healing signals back to the brain.
And finally, we landed on the absolute necessity of radical, messy self-acceptance. The understanding that true confidence and secure attachment are not born from achieving some flawless state of perfection. They are born from the imperfect, continuous, courageous practice of showing up for yourself, even when your instincts are screaming at you to run.
It has been a heavy, complex, but I think a profoundly illuminating conversation.
I completely agree. And to you, the listener, I want to offer a final thought on this process. Facing these neurological truths, looking honestly at the foundations of your own walls, can be utterly exhausting. It is hard work.
It really is.
But understanding the mechanical why behind your actions, knowing that your isolation was a brilliant survival tactic, not a fundamental character flaw, is the key that unlocks the door. You are holding the map now. You have the power to create a future where you no longer have to slap the plate away, where you don't have to run from the exact love you so deeply need.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring us back to that very first image of the Trojan horse at the city gates, the muddy, complex waters of the human heart. If the pain of loneliness, the fear of kindness, and the anticipation of rejection are ultimately just old, familiar habits, what would happen if, just for tomorrow, you intentionally sat with the discomfort of letting someone truly care for you without trying to figure out their hidden agenda?
What would happen if you just let the horse inside?
Until next time.